And we're off to the races. Ladies and gentlemen, I am super delighted because each night, it seems, I have a new person, a new wonderful, just a story to be shared with the world. And I love nothing more than to bring you the best. And tonight we have one for the books, as you would say. We're thrilled to welcome a person who wears many hats, a person of many talents. And we've had her sister on the show. You'll obviously know, we've had, it wasn't that long ago that I've had a series of people on who delighted us with her wonderful trades of different storylines, that she had, the different movies, if you will, and things that they made her along with this wonderful person I'm about to introduce. And they have they're basically two sisters who created a wonderful film production company, if you will, called the Boylan Sisters. And you hear all about it, how they started. And I'm really giddy, and I'm all over the place, as you know. I basically moonlight, so I have a different job at night, but so I'm really excited because this is my favorite job. My wife says, go do a podcast because you like talking. I'm long-winded. Guys, she's a licensed clinical social worker. She's an award-winning filmmaker, producer, screenwriter, and author, and whose life and work beautifully intertwined with faith, mental wellness, and storytelling. Guys, give it up for Andrea M. Polnaszek to the show. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm excited. I'm excited, and super giddy about getting you on. I know we had Alexandra not that long ago, and she must have told you how ADHD I am, scatterbrain, but we tried to we had a great time nevertheless. And yeah, and now we have you on, so it's pretty cool. So without further ado, let's get started with Andrea.
Thank you for having me. I'm so
I'm
excited.
excited. Well, you're so gracious to come on. So I cannot, thank you enough because you have so much to offer. Both of you guys have created such an empire. And
Mm,
without God, of course, it couldn't have been done. So I want to hear all about it and your humble beginnings when you started. Your dad was a minister, right? As a
mhm.
preacher, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so that must have been what was it like, growing up in the household where I'm sure there are a lot of rules, right? A lot of expectations.
Yeah, well, I was the oldest, so you interviewed my sister. She was the youngest, so I was the top, and there's two brothers in between us. And it's funny you say, was there a lot of rules? I would just say there was a lot of church, and not in a bad way. Like church
Really?
was our life. It was, and it was good. It was my family. It was like I would say the best way to grow up, really.
Yes,
We did
I agree.
we weren't Baptist. My dad was a congregational pastor, so we didn't
Mhm.
have the Wednesday night tradition. So until I moved
Okay.
down south, I didn't know that whole tradition. But we had youth group, we had choir practice, we had the Christmas plays, all and always with our church family. That's what I just remember, is being with our
Mhm.
church family all the time. It was wonderful.
I marvel at both you and your sister because you guys, it's wonderful when you have a lot of people don't realize, and we're talking through the lens of obviously you and I, two churchgoers, and when you start off, it's so incredible because we go through so many like trials and tribulations in life, but when God is a constant and church is a constant, it almost shields you from what could have happened. Talk about worst
Mm,
case scenarios, because of because you're covered, as it were, by the covering of God's blood. And
mhm,
when you're going through the church, you don't realize that, but also too, you add a lot of skills to your skill set. I mean, filming,
mm,
all that comes into play. You just finished talking about doing skits, for Christmas
mhm.
and stuff.
Yep.
And we get turned on to that early on at the church, and you get your singing also. A lot of folks don't
Mhm.
understand that we get singing when you join a choir. I was a
Yep.
choir boy early on, and I got to sing. And later, did a lot of secular singing and whatnot, which I like a lot of secular music. But nevertheless, the foundations is a good foundation. It's
Hmm.
on good principles, biblical principles, if you will.
Hmm.
And so I marvel at how beautiful it is that both of you guys stayed in the will, if you will, and then
Hmm.
got to live out your life just the way it was intended to. And now,
Hmm.
flash forward, look at you, you're doing great stuff, and clinical social worker, which in the church, there's a lot of people that have mental health. And cut me
Hmm.
off if when you want, because today I'm more long-winded than most days. A lot of people have mental health issues. They come in with a lot of problems to the churches,
Hmm.
as you and they come and seek the guidance of the pastor or the elder, right?
Hmm.
And so you firsthand must have heard a lot of the challenges that came. And was that kind of what sort of led you down the path of clinical social work?
Hmm.
Sort of
That's
could
a
have.
great, yeah, that's a great question. Like, how did it start? You said so much in that. So there's a couple things I just want to jump on. So I accepted Jesus when I was 4. My mom always tells the story that she would read a story from the library and a Bible story to us every night before we go to bed. And at the end of the Bible story, she would say, "Do you want to accept Jesus?" And I would say no. And she said she'd read the story, a different story every night. And the story, I was 4 years old. The story was about Jesus. After he had appeared to the disciples on the beach, and there's a
Okay.
fire, and I can see the picture in the children's Bible, and
Right.
they're eating the fish, and he's speaking to them, or teaching them. And at the end of that story, she asked, "Do you want to accept Jesus?" And I said yes. And I always say that in that moment, God spared me from so much, because I really didn't rebel. I followed after Jesus, and it's by the grace of God. It's
Yeah.
not it's not
Yeah. You're
because
not
of
taking any
me.
credit. Right.
I know lots of other, sordid stories, but for me, it's like he spared me, and I'm so grateful. And I walked in his ways. I went to Christian college, and then I went to seminary, and that's where I got my social work degree. But going on that idea of my father, who was the pastor that I grew up under, he is probably one of the most grace-filled people I know still to this day. He's still living, still with us. And he had such a disarming way of listening to people, and people just, I remember as a kid, people coming, knocking on the door and just disheveled and in tears. And I've got to
Right.
talk to the pastor, and so I grew up with that. And I think I'm just a natural caregiver, probably being the oldest. I cared a lot for my siblings, and I wanted to actually go into psychology, but I was talked out of it because of the fact that you have to kind of get a PhD in order to actually do counseling. So I was encouraged to instead pursue the social work degree and then go on the clinical track for social work. And that was like, I mean, again, the grace of God. It was the right fit
Right.
for me. It
It-
completely the right fit. I think because I'm scrappy, and the way that I serve people is, hands and knees, washing feet kind of service. And so as a
sure.
social worker, even though I'm a therapist and I work in the clinical realm, I do actually in-home therapy. So I go to people's homes. I do family therapy around the dining room table.
Beautiful.
In that way has that pastoral feel to it,
Yes.
similar to the way
Yes.
that my dad modeled. And I'm actually married to a pastor too.
Oh, wow.
So
I didn't know
so our
that.
church that we had our church unfortunately closed after COVID,
Okay.
but for 17 years it was a recovery church, and we just
Oh,
really
nice.
believed like you could bring your most messy broken pieces, and that the
Hmm.
best place to take that is to the cross. And so
God will
that is
mend them.
like,
Yeah.
yes, and that's definitely my whole life has been about serving. And you know I
Beautiful.
mean, there's different techniques to counseling, and there's ways that you can definitely
Right.
help people. But I gotta say, the wonderful counselor, it's Jesus, and that's where we
Right.
want to bring people back to. He's the one that does
Yes.
all the fixing, right?
Absolutely. I remember vividly. I wandered off, and I fell off the bandwagon many a times in terms of backsliding. I suppose
Mm,
that's the right way of saying it. And like when you smoking cigarettes every day, and then you get hooked on different stuff, like cigarettes mostly. Um, and I couldn't quit, and I never forget. I'm gonna share this with you, Andrea. That one day um I was looking, I was like fiending, I was like looking for cigarettes, and I had this sick fascination and fixation with cigarettes, and I needed to find another cigarette. And it's like, okay, I knew a place, and at the time I was staying in Echo Park, and I'm sure you're familiar with
mm,
LA very well.
mhm,
Stayed in Echo Park and worked at a school there in Echo Park as well. And I went to the liquor store, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm scrambling. Like, just where could I possibly look? Let me look at my little change box, we had in our cars.
mhm,
Found some change, and they sell like singles, because I was trying to at that point kind of quit also.
mm,
And then I said, okay, God, I'm gonna try this on my own and see just how far I can get. It's just idiotic of me, I guess you could say. But nevertheless, I felt as though, okay, if God's going to show me here, you know what I mean? Like his
mhm,
truth, and he's going to show me his grace and how strong he is, how he's going to carry me through this little
mm,
storm. And sure enough, I tried, and then within 2 days, I fell back into it. So I was looking for cigarette cancer sticks, and I grabbed me another
mm,
pack of cigarettes. I said, "Man, boy, I can't quit." And then I said,
mm,
God, I'm sorry. I'm so ashamed to come to you, and I was so loving, Father, and I am so sorry that I even put you through a test. How ignorant is that? But
mm,
God, it was like so not magical. I don't want to use that word because it's not in the right context, but
mhm,
world standards, that would be considered magical.
mhm.
I smoked, I stopped smoking cigarettes. And like the following day, I didn't have a crave anymore. It was cold turkey. And it's like,
Wow.
oh my God, dude, like how did you even, you would never be able to quit something. Like, I don't know how to explain it to you, but I have no use for it anymore. Like I don't have that. So that was by the blood of Christ. Like that, and God's my witness, right here, to sister talking, in Christ. I felt like the best I've had in
Wow.
years, and it changed the course of my life, my trajectory in that. And real quick, I'm sharing this with
Hmm.
you. I want you to continue because you have a lot to talk about. Um, it changed me in the sense that I I like things that I couldn't get rid of before. It was very
Hmm.
instantaneous. Just take them
Hmm.
to the Lord. You know what I mean, and get on my knees and then pray,
Hmm.
and it was gone. It was gone. It was gone, and it was so magnificent, and God is so wonderful, and we owe everything to God. But I just want to share that with you.
Thank you for that testimony.
It's
That
been a
is
great testimony.
so encouraging because really nicotine is one of the toughest. I thankfully didn't smoke cigarettes, but
Yeah,
the people in my life that have, it's one of the hardest things to
hard
kick.
kick.
So,
Yeah,
like you said, by the grace of God and His strength, to
yeah,
help us with that. But
yeah.
wow,
So you have a private practice, right?
I
That's what
do.
you have, private practice. That's fantastic, which allows you to then see your clients, and I'm guessing, right, and
Mhm.
the folks that come to you, and you set families and individuals alike,
Yep.
correct?
My clients mostly are children, actually, either foster kids or adopted. So
Oh,
the
wow.
family
Praise the Lord.
perspective is so important because there's a lot of attachment issues and lots of
Mhm.
trauma, and yeah, and one of the things most recently, I mean recent in the sense of I'm old enough, but like
Mhm.
5 years, probably the last 5 years of my practice, I have a lot of kids that were exposed to meth, by their
Oh,
parents,
wow.
either in utero before they were born, or that were actually cooking meth in the home after the children were born. And so this has been a really interesting part of my practice, is the a drug exposure, and it's a different drug, so kids are responding to it differently, and it's really changing their brain chemistry,
Oh,
and
my
then it's
goodness.
making it very interesting to try to find creative ways to teach and do education and live, actually, because the the brain chemistry change is different than how alcohol affects us, or even marijuana, and even other drugs like heroin and cocaine. So that's been a really fascinating. It's real. I'm a very, well, because we're going to talk about film later, but creativity is really important to me. And I told you, I'm scrappy. And so I'm always like trying to kind of, like get inside someone's mind and go, okay, what can we do? How can we make this work? How can we help you be more successful in your home and in your school environment?
And if I may, let me interject here by saying, also, I think the wisdom that's bestowed upon you from God, it's allowed you to kind of figure things out, right? In a sense. Wouldn't you say that in partnership with the psychology you learn along the way to help kind of better treat the people? I would say, you'd say it's a duality?
100%. And I mean, I don't know. So our very first movie, Catching Faith, it features a Bible study that I wrote called the Elijah Project. So to go on to jump on to what you're just saying, the Bible, the stories in the Bible, no joke. It feels so simple to say this. They will change your life. If you get into the Word of God, it will change your life. He says it's alive, but those stories are timeless. And Elijah's story for me was one of those stories that I was in a place of real hopelessness. My third child had gone to school full days. I was a pastor's wife. Our church had a lot of really heavy, difficult things happening. I felt totally overwhelmed. We were totally broke as a family. And I really thought, I'm a counselor, and I'm like, I need counseling, but we didn't have insurance. I didn't have access to it. We didn't have money for it. And I stood in my kitchen and I said, all right, God, you are the wonderful counselor. I'm a counselor. I've got all these resources and books. Show me what I need to do because I need to get well, and I'm not okay right now. And it was very much like a exhaustion, I think, is more than anything, just to really like kind of hitting
the bottom have come off, and it's like, what else is there to do? Throw my arms up and then, God, catch me, because I'm falling,
And that's exactly. And so what happened was, on the Sunday prior to this experience, I had been in Bible study where we were reading through the entire Bible, and we were at the story of Elijah, which I knew as a Sunday school story, right? But when the Sunday school story, they clean it up. But when I was listening to it as an adult, and when Elijah is running for his life because Jezebel has said, off with your head, by tomorrow morning, he says, God, take me and let me be like my ancestors. Well, that means he was like, God, just let me die. Like, get me out of here. And I was like, well, what happens after you tell God you want to die? Like, you get the lightning bolt from sky, right? Like, you're not supposed to say that. But if you look at the passage of scripture, actually what Elijah falls asleep under the broom tree. And what does God do? He sends him an angel. And the angel has bread and water, right? And then he says, go back to sleep. And I love that part of the story because I love to sleep. And at that point in my life, I was incredibly sleep deprived. I had 3 kids, So it was like, eat, drink, and go to sleep. And just let me take care of it. I've got a plan. And then, what happens next? He goes to the mountain of the Lord. God reveals himself to him. And he says, you're not alone. I've saved 3,000, and I want you to go appoint, the successor of the king, as well as your own mentee is waiting for you with Elisha, and you can do this. You've got this. And that story just like brought me back to life. And what happened is I created a workbook with activities that help go through that story. A series, exactly. And then what happened, fast forward, so I'm raising kids. I was actually at that time a stay-at-home mom, and I was a pastor's wife, and I was writing. And my sister called me because she had made a movie that had done well, got on the stores. It was carried in Walmart, and her executive producer said, what's really going to be hot next year is faith-based movies and dragon movies. we should have made a dragon faith-based movie, but we didn't. She called me and she said, Andrea, do you want to join forces with me? You want to help me write a faith-based movie? And what's funny is I really didn't like faith-based movies. I thought they were pretty cheesy, and I didn't really feel like they didn't capture my story. Like I was like, I don't know. They always seem to be less about what it means to live your life out for God and more about that salvation experience. And I was like, I'm really past the salvation experience. I want something like, what's the nitty gritty? So anyway, we wrote Catching Faith, and we were able to incorporate the Bible study in it as a tool for the women to, find God, but also find themselves and how God wants to make us the best versions of ourselves. That's our job here until we go to heaven. And so that's the first experience that we had. We ended up making the movie here in the town that I live in, and then it's history. Now we've made 6 movies together.
Now that it's funny because first of all, you're relating everything you're telling me about. I thought about the scripture; it just popped out in my head. It's nothing. There's no such thing as happenstance. So I think that was meant to be. When I'm weak, I'm strong. Right.
Yes.
And it's people. I didn't understand that prior to rereading that, and then I think I went to church once, and then the preacher was talking about it. When I'm weak, I'm strong. It's like it at first doesn't make sense when you think about it, and then like you're at your weakest, and you're strong because God carries you through the storm, and that's you're at your strongest because obviously God comes through for us. He fights our battles, and it's like, why do you want to? Such as a burden we have, all the burden or the whole brunt of the world's burden on our shoulders, as it were, and all we have to do is just call on God. So I think when you're talking, I was just thinking about that running right through my brain, and it was coursing through me. And it's interesting when you were saying about the salvation. It's so true because like when you're referring to a lot of movies. I used to have an app called Pure Flix.
Yes.
And that's what a lot of these films were about. So I watched a couple, and there was like, although like I'm not gonna call them washed up actors. A lot of actors that stopped working in Hollywood kind of started making these movies. They weren't necessarily bad, but like you said, they're kind of cheesy, and I do remember that quite well. So you guys, after this, you guys partner up and do the Boylan Sisters kind of journey, as it were. Tell us about how it starts, and I can't hardly wait to hear all about it. Your end, because I know we have your sister's version of it. She went through her own journey, and then you came along, and what was it like? I mean, geez, right away things started opening up and blossoming, right?
Absolutely. It's fun because we did have very different journeys. Obviously, Alexandra had she'd done all the hard work in Hollywood to be able to, build and understand what filmmaking is, and all the things I didn't. I just knew that I like certain movies and I don't like certain movies. And so I was kind of a movie connoisseur. But I also did know family. And I did know, what our family enjoyed watching. And one of the things that was increasingly happening, my children are now, my youngest is 19, but at the time, my girls were in middle school, and there was nothing that we could watch for a slumber party that I didn't feel like I needed to close their eyes, or that was too babyish. Like there was stuff you could watch, but it just wasn't the right age. Right. So I just started to say, I've got to influence this. I didn't expect ever that God would put me in that place. But as we started to have the opportunity to make movies, I'm like, we need to make movies for teen girls. We really do. And the moms are watching. So let's make it for teen girls, but something that moms will enjoy as well. And that's kind of how our story and our journey, Alexandra and I, happened and has continued. And it's been just such a beautiful opportunity to we say we want to make movies that are Disney for Christians, so it's like those good core values, those
Yeah.
Judeo-Christian values, but packaged in just a fun, colorful, exciting, high concept way. And it's been just an absolute blast. So we first made Catching Faith, and then we made a Christmas movie back in our hometown, and my dad's church that we grew up in is featured in the movie. And then we made Catching Faith 2. We got to make a sequel, and we made Switched, The Greatest
Yeah.
Inheritance and Identity
I want to
Crisis.
ask you something real quick while you're on that. You can continue. That one deals primarily with bullying, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's really good. That's a pretty hot topic, and most of us as teenagers deal with it. A lot of us, a good deal of us. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and what personal experiences informed you guys to create this movie, or did you? I mean, obviously your clinical studies and
Yeah.
well, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, Switched is really about walking a day in someone else's shoes. So earlier in our conversation, we were talking about really putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. And I think if you think about being like Jesus, what did Jesus do? He got low, he washed people's feet, he served them, he met their greatest need, right?
Right.
When we're walking around in our regular lives, it's hard to know how to do that. And oftentimes I think that we feel so like maybe resources are so scarce. It feels like I
Sure.
got to grab and hold on to my own stuff. I got to make sure I take care of myself, which kind of goes into what you just said about when we are weak, he is strong, but
Right.
we want to be strong. I think that's our natural bent is I want to protect myself. I want to take care of
Right.
myself. And so when we were looking at writing Switched, it was like, how do you illustrate that that the bully has their own journey? Because it's easy to hate the
Yeah.
bully, right?
Sure.
And then also for the person that's bullied, what is it, what do you really want? You think you want maybe the life of the person that's bullying you, but what if you knew what their life really was? Because usually when you're bullying, it's because there's some place in you that's very deeply insecure or something that's not
With
going
the
well.
satisfaction of oneself, right?
Exactly. And so for me, I would say more, I didn't have a lot of personal experience with bullying myself, but I mean, I also wasn't like the most popular person. I always tell kids, high school, you just survive it. And
It's
then
such a
later
blur
on, you get
anyway,
to,
right?
yeah, you get to look back and go, whoa, I did that. That was a really hard thing, But as a clinician, I mean, you hear it all the time. And I think now, like, the way people are bullied, and I could talk for kids, but we can easily translate this over to adults. The way
Sure.
people use the internet to bully,
Good
and
job saying that.
also like phones and the ability to text, right? Like when I'm looking at you, I'm not going to say probably anything rude to you as I'm looking at you, exchanging information with you. But if I could just write it down, then whatever I'm upset about, suddenly you get all the guts in the world, right? Because you're not looking
Sure.
that person in the
Sure.
face.
Right.
So the
Right.
things that people are saying to each other are things we never in the past would have actually
That's
said to
right.
each other.
It's like a
Yeah.
passive aggressive kind of situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Many a times people do that. You hide under a guise of I'm a good guy, and then gosh, you could be kind of almost a bad and foul at typing stuff you're not supposed to, because
Mm-hmm.
it's like almost like the subtext for us actors, right? And
Yes.
movie people, the subtext of what you're really thinking inside, like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. That I hadn't thought of that. That's so true. I did, however, think about the bullying situation because there's documentaries. It's been well documented,
Mm-hmm.
and where there's that one lady that was bullying her daughter, her own daughter, and oh my
Yes.
God, it made the news. I mean, how she
I
was like, it was
know.
me the whole time that was really hurting her daughter, and
Mm-hmm.
and it was like one of these Netflix films, documentaries, which it was very troublesome just to
Mm-hmm.
think that a parent to go to those lengths, to hurt
Mm-hmm.
their own child, because perhaps, like you said, it's sometimes usually an underlying problem that they've
Yep.
had suppressed, probably with
Yep.
their own upbringing, right? And such.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Let me ask you this: Do you do you ever feel as though, I mean, obviously, clearly the spectrum of political spectrum and the world at large has gone bananas. It's upended,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
And on both sides of the fence, I mean, when, it doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or
No.
Republican or indifferent, right? You're
Hmm.
gonna you have all levels of corruption.
Hmm.
Um, do you find that? I mean, because I noticed that it's almost like people are starting to revert back to. I don't know if you sense this, at all, but to the old ways. To people are starting to, they want normalcy. They want to come back to the church, the family and church, and
Mm-hmm.
people, you could hear it through the music. Even secular music is starting to, you know what I mean? Like you listen to, oh my God,
Hmm.
it's got Christian connotations, and you hear Jelly Roll, and all these
Hmm.
famous people were before it wasn't. Do you find that we're seeing more of that, and now because we're living kind of like in apocalyptic times, as they would.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, they always say that we have a God-sized hole in our hearts, right?
Mhm,
Every human, man or
mhm.
woman. And I feel like I think uh, I think there was a season of time, and I would certainly say for myself as well, where I really believed that the American dream was that I would feel complete when I got the American dream.
Okay,
So, the house, the minivan, the three kids, the Labrador retriever, that life would
sure,
somehow bring like this fullness. And not to say that it didn't. I love being married and I love being a mom. And
sure,
I love my home, but I believe that and that was part of actually my crisis of faith with when the Elijah Project came about, was that I had thought that I would be fulfilled with those things. And I think that maybe our culture, like we actually for a while had a lot of stuff. A lot of people had a lot of stuff. There
sure.
was a general wealth, I think, in the United States, and not everybody. Some people were, but just a what we even thought was poor was really not poor if you went anywhere else in the world. And
Sure.
I think that what happened is with that we got lulled into a sense of security that we were our providers and we're
Right.
not. And so now I think what we're hearing is maybe like this yearning or even this acknowledgement that
Right.
actually we need somebody bigger than us. There's got to be something bigger out there than just us because this isn't
Love it.
working. And
Love it.
um, and,
Yeah.
and I kind of feel like that's happening on a fairly big scale because the problems that we're facing in our country are big. I mean, the violence,
Yeah.
um the yeah I spend a lot of time in schools in our public schools, and
Sure.
it's a scary place to be. And i
Yes.
i went to public school. I graduated from public high school in the Northeast too. It wasn't like
Oh,
wasn't a Christian. That is like considered the frozen north up there. It wasn't
mhm.
Christian at all, but it was different than it is now. Like there's just a sense of insecurity and maybe fragility that we
and
can get
and
hurt at
zero
any moment.
and zero
Yeah.
and zero empathy. Don't have
Yes.
to for anybody.
Yes.
I think people are more inclined to do evil than they are to do good, and then
Mm,
actually try to capture it on the phone, right? For a
yeah, I know.
viral blip. Um,
Yep.
I'm hearing you out. I love everything you're saying is right up my alley. It's like it's so true. And
Mm.
I have friends that are more kind of n- not what do you call it, agnostic, or people that are,
Agnostic. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're not, they're not favorably, like you're not going to say like they're not against it, but you just don't believe it per se. Even you find them questioning their
Mm,
own beliefs and saying, oh my God, like something's about to go down that's really gonna
mhm, mhm,
um be super impactful to this world. I mean, are we
mhm.
are we gonna implode? It feels that way, like we're gonna self implode. But
That's a
um you know it's funny, but I am gonna say too, you feel like you sense that that's kind of like the commonality, if you will, of what's going on in the world. However, specifically in the United States, how people used to have more wealth, and now there's just a huge disparity, you know. But you also feel as though we have a covering over us for us believers. You
Mm,
know, you never feel like you're, you know, it's God will protect you, right? Going back to Psalms 91, right?
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
you think like um, you find that although the narratives can change, you know, one thing that's never going to change is, you know, your belief in God, and
That's
that
right.
God's steadfast and He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, right? So no matter
Amen.
what, we're always going to be uplifted.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to ask you because I think, if I'm not mistaken, the book, the series, the Elijah Project series, you guys, it went like international because it's also in Portuguese and other languages. Can you touch on that?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you. It's funny because I was actually going to mention that when you began to talk about I was talking about the United States, but I've had
Mhm.
this amazing, well, God has been really good to me and I've been able to travel a lot of places outside of the
Yes.
US.
Amen.
And when you do that, that's when you really realize disparity. You know, like I always say, we might have old cars, but my family of 5 has 3 cars, and isn't it like the top 3% of of the world has like 1 car. So like when you think about that, it's like I'm rich. I'm like filthy
Yeah,
rich when you consider
totally.
in the, you know, in the world. But anyway, yeah, great fun story. So if you could just indulge me for a moment, I'll share.
Take it
I
away.
I wrote the Elijah Project. We made Catching Faith, and I started to get at the end of the Catching Faith movie. It says based on the Elijah Project. So we got a
Mm,
lot of people inquiring about the Bible study, and at first it was only available on my website, but then we were able to get it put on to Amazon and one particular morning on Saturday morning, thank you, I got a phone call, and I never answer numbers that I don't know, but I did. And it was crazy. It happened to be like the Saturday morning where our kitchen was just like full of excitement. My husband was making pancakes and we had friends over, and it was like just loud. And the person on the other end of the phone was speaking in broken English. And I'm like, and so I remember I went up to sit on my landing so that I could really listen. And the gist of the conversation was my now friend Ingrid, who is from Ocala, Florida. She had watched Catching Faith the night before. And at the end of the movie, she had Googled the Elijah Project. And this is a miracle. You're going to love this story.
okay, go
The
ahead. Great.
entire workbook came up on her phone. It doesn't exist online. It's like
What?
it was like you have to order it. It came up on
You're
her
kidding.
phone. She sat up all night, did the entire study, called her pastor's wife in the morning and said, I need to do this study with our church. Um, Gave what she had gotten up on her phone to her pastor, calls me and says, I'm wondering if you would be willing to have me translate it into Spanish. And I
Wow.
was like, sure. And that's like this whole journey for me. It's been like, yes, yes, Lord. So I was like, sure. So now we laugh about it because she's like, literally, she's this woman who, you know, English is her second language. She calls me up, and the next day I send her a PDF I actually sent her the Word document so that she could translate it into Spanish. She ends up sending it back to me and says, hey, could you get this like formatted so that I could get it printed out because I have a ministry in Cuba? And I said, sure. So I got it formatted, and then I said to my husband, I feel like we're supposed to get these printed, like pay for the printing of this to get sent to Cuba. So I
Beautiful.
did it. Right. And then Ingrid gives me her address. I send them to her. In between this, Jim, I'm not getting any, like, we're not having like friend conversations. It's like an email, I send email, you know, send back, get it printed. She gives me her address. I send it to her. Um, Literally, I get a picture on my phone of her suitcase, all packed with the Elijah Project workbooks in Spanish on the top. And she says, you know, departing for Cuba tomorrow. 4 days later, she sends me a video of 30 women in Spanish sending a greeting, thanking me for the Elijah Project.
God
I mean,
bless.
thank God it was God. It was just, but it ended up. So then my husband and I'm like, Perry, you gotta listen to me. Something's happening. Like the workbook just went to Cuba. Oh my gosh. And he's like, they're going to ask you to go. And I'm like, I don't speak Spanish. They're not going to ask me to go. I barely speak English well. And he's like, no, they're going to ask you to go. So she ends up calling me when she gets back and says, Andrea, when can you come with me to go to Cuba? And I was like, yes, I'll go. So I went, and now the Elijah Project study has gone from coast to coast in Cuba. We've gone it went viral. We have over 500 mentors teaching on a regular basis the study, and we got to go and bring the movie. Alexandra got to go with me, and then I've been back, and because the second Elijah Project study, I went and taught there, and then a lady from Brazil. We have a very large Latin American audience, and a lady from Brazil contacted me and said, "Can I translate it into Portuguese?" Sure. Amen. So that's how that all happened.
Go to Brazil soon.
I know, I would like to. That would be really fun.
Wow, what a blessing. I mean, this is how God works. It's unreal. I mean, just phenomenal. Phenomenal. I want to ask you, Andrea, about your film projects.
Yes.
You guys are doing somewhat of a workshop, is that right? Where you're teaching other people how to become filmmakers, where you can sort of from a thought germinates its inception to conception. Is that what you're doing? Can you shed light on that?
Yes, I can. Alexandra is teaching classes. I am not. So she is our expert. Let's plug her in. No, she is an excellent teacher, and she is so good. And you're right. She takes you from the beginning, from what do I do? I want to make a movie, to how to be able to actually do your screenplay, get your team together and make a movie. And she's teaching it and she, as you know from your interview, she is so much fun. She's got so much energy.
She has a lot of energy. And her story, her life story, is one of a kind. Mm-hmm. It reads like a Hollywood story, like a movie. I told her, and it's like from beginning, it's got its arc. And then it's like nobody ever shot in small towns, and then things started coming together, and then the extras came from the small town people. And what better way of promoting themselves? You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
if you're part of something, you're gonna feel as though you have some kind of a stake in it, as it were. I'm really excited for the future. I'm excited for what's to come. Do you have any coming down the pike you like to talk about, or?
Yeah, I would, because I actually feel like this really fits in with what we've been talking about. So one of Alexandra and I have quite a few scripts, and they're in different forms of development. And we make our movies from conception to completion. So we're always looking for investors. If there's anybody that would like to invest in film, that's how we are able to make our movies happen. But one of our stories is called Technology Tripping, and it's a 3-generation story. It's about a young lady who gets in a she's texting and driving, she gets in a car accident. Her judge, instead of sending her to juvie, sends her on a technology-free road trip with her grandmother. And that trip, she's so addicted that she's trying to, like, fiending, like you talked at the beginning of about the cigarettes. No, she's fiending for her phone, and she literally, like, steals a phone from Walmart. She's trying to take phones from people that are like tourists when they're at these different tourist attractions. Like, she wants to get online. And that, for me, I feel very passionate about the story, because the kids that I work with, it's real. And it's not just the kids. Okay. It's not just the kids. It's all of us. Like, we just are, we because we're adults, we're allowed to. But for kids, it's literally, I mean, I had a family who they were trying to get their kids off the internet, and they, turned off the router, all that good stuff. their thermostat was connected to the internet, and the kids figured out how to hack into the thermostat so they could get online. So that's how, like, significant I think that this issue is with this next
Yeah,
generation, because it's the way they feel connected. It's the way they feel wired. And
sure.
we
Quite
need to
literally, right? No
learn.
pun intended. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to teach, and we need to understand it. Instead of just saying don't do it, we need to understand what it's doing and how it's affecting us and how we can be responsible. Because just like what
Yeah.
we're doing right now, this is amazing. Technology is incredible, but we also need to know moderation, right? And
Yeah.
because anything out of moderation can be unhealthy and not good for us. So that movie, it's called
Yeah.
Technology Tripping. If you can pray for us. I really,
Yeah.
really want to
You
see that
will.
one get made.
Absolutely. And I also wanted to ask you, so and talk about more to your point, this whole thing with technology. I think the idea that you're chasing the next soundbite, has a lot
Mm,
to do with, you send out a text, but or you're looking for information, and there's an insurmountable amount of information coming your way. I mean,
yeah.
every second it feels like, and it's almost you don't want to skip a beat almost, and that's how people
Hmm.
get into accidents.
Yes.
There's it's so like it's so rewarding to feel the chemicals in your brain, the endorphins,
Yes.
if you will, and stuff, um, come into play. Like you feel like, oh my God, I feel so good. And you
Yep.
keep getting so much. I'm talking about earlier on when I was like hooked on Facebook back in the
Hmm.
day, MySpace, for us,
Yep.
40 year olds. The MySpace and the Facebook, and specifically the Facebook, you kind of live for the likes, you live for
Yep.
that sort of, you need it validation, if you will. And
Hmm.
I think it's
Hmm.
it's it's part of the fabric of the world now. At least I would say America, but I dare say the world, because
Yeah.
everyone's connected.
Hmm.
It's a necessary tool, but it also can be a double-edged sword, right? Um,
Yes.
that's it. Can you let's share your it's right down to 46, almost 47 minutes, and I couldn't be happier that we went over the 45. Um, it doesn't matter. I am having a great chat with you. Real quick, your social media handles, please.
Oh, well, Boylan Sisters at Boylan Sisters. And I'm at Andrea M. Polnaszek. And I really suggest that your viewers go to our website, theboylansisters.com. It has all of our movies, but it also has all of our companion materials. They're free downloads on there so that you can have family conversations about the
Okay.
movies. And my own website too, andreapolnaszek.com, that has all of our resources and even more of the books that aren't related to the specifically related to the movies.
So you have it. You have tools. You have resources there for free
Mm-hmm.
resources. Fantastic, and then to help people and direct them to God ultimately. So thank you
Yes,
so much for this time. May the Lord bless you immensely. You and your wonderful sister. You tell her I said hello,
I
and
will.
Terry and your just wonderful family. You're such a blessing to my heart. Just listening to you, I felt a rush of peace and
Mm.
tranquility and just amazement at how God puts people together. Thank you so much once again. I hope we can make this a habit and have both you and your sister come on the next time. All
Would
three of us
love
get
that.
fun, right? It'd be cool. It'd be
Yes, that would be
fascinating.
so fun.
All right, we're gonna make that happen. Maybe I would say 5 months, 4 or 5 months. Yeah,
Sounds
why not?
good.
All right, guys, that's my show. Almost Famous Radio Podcast. Yours truly, Jim Francis Mesa. Andrea, thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you.
It's
It
been fun. Thanks so much.
was so fun.